So this is acacia tree, and according to ancient story in the Bible times, the tabernacle that God asked Moses to build is made of this tree acacia. It's just a small tree. So this is the photo of how the tabernacle look like. He's our teacher. Okay. Our tour for today is now starting. So we are gonna go to the tabernacle, the third tabernacle that was made.
When you enter into the courtyard is the altar.
Yeah.
The altar was made of acacia wood covered in copper. And inside the altar was the eternal fire. God was the one who started the fire when they first built the tabernacle, but the Israelites were never allowed to let it burn out. That's why it was called the eternal fire. They always had to go out and find wood to make sure the fire kept burning continuously. And this is where they made many, many sacrifices. There were 5 different kinds of sacrifices, each with a different purpose and a different meaning behind it. 4 of them were done on a regular basis every single day. But there was one sacrifice that was far more important than all the rest. This one I'll be focusing on for a lot of this tour. It was called the sin sacrifice, or the atonement sacrifice. It was done only once a year and only by the high priest. Behind the altar was the copper wash base. This was made of pure copper, and it was made from the mirrors of the women that donated their mirrors, polished copper, to make the wash base. So the priests, when they looked in here, they probably saw their own reflection in the wash base. They did not wash their hands like this, because then it would have filled up with blood and dirt, but rather they took the water outside and would wash their hands and their feet outside the wash base. They had to do that before making a sacrifice or before going into the tent. This represents purification, that we need to be purified before we can enter into the presence of God. But if that's the case, then why wouldn't this be the first thing that we see when we come into the courtyard? Why would God command them to place first the altar and then the wash basin? Because it shows that we cannot be purified without there being a sacrifice first. This is like an image of the process of salvation. There's significance in the placement and positioning of the items relative to each other. This shows that through the sacrifice we are purified, through the blood we are purified, and then we can enter into God's presence.
Amen.
Mm-hmm. Everything has a reason. Every little detail that God gave, there's a reason behind it. Even if you don't understand it.
This is the wash basin. Holy of Holies. This will be the inner tabernacle.
Alright, maybe come in a little bit further so that more people can fit. So here I'll talk a little bit about the logistics of the tabernacle, how they carried it from place to place and how they moved it. So for 40 years, the Israelites had to carry this through the desert. But when they carried it, they didn't take it as one big building like you see here. They had to take it apart piece by piece and transport each piece individually, like Legos. You like to play with Legos? I see some young people here.
Legos, yeah.
So I love Legos as well. So imagine Legos, but a little bit bigger. The main pieces were these big wooden boards, big panels of acacia wood covered in gold. Each panel was 1.5 cubits wide by 10 cubits tall. So the whole tent was as tall as between 4.5 to 5 meters. There were 48 of these panels in total, 20 on one side, 20 on the other side, and 8 in the back. Each panel had a couple of things that held it in place to keep it from falling apart, like these hooks that they were attached to one another, as well as these poles, also made of acacia wood, covered in gold, held in place by these little rings. And if you look at the bottom, they also had these big blocks of silver, pure silver. Each panel had 2 of these blocks, and each of these blocks weighed between 35 to 40 kilograms of pure silver. Trivia question.
One person carry one.
Actually, I think it was a couple of people that carried one.
Oh,
Heavy.
That would have
45
carried
is
each piece.
heavy.
Heavy.
Who knows who did all of that hard work, the logistical work of carrying the tabernacle?
Levi.
Levites, correct. The tribe of Levi. But the tribe of
only
Levi,
Levi's can do.
correct, only the Levites were the ones given the responsibility by God to carry the tabernacle.
And actually the specific Levi tribe to carry its part differently.
Yes, correct. The Levites were divided into 3 main groups, or 3 main families, which were Kehat, Gershon, and Merari. And each of these 3 families were responsible for a different section, correct? So how many Levites do you think were needed to carry the tabernacle? Take a guess. 5,000? 10,000?
1 million.
100.
100?
500.
Any other guesses?
50.
50?
200.
200? So, the book of Numbers gives precise numbers of Levites. It gives the detailed descriptions of those 3 groups that we talked about. It says exactly how many men from each of these 3 groups helped carry the tabernacle. And when you put the numbers in the calculator, you add it all up. It adds to a total and precise number of 8,580 men.
8,580.
8580. Correct. Men between the ages of 30 to 50 who would repeatedly for 40 years take it apart, rebuild, take it apart, rebuild again and again and
For
again.
40 years.
For 40 years until they finally arrived at the promised land. So yes, I think whoever said 10,000 was the closest. Good job.
You got a gift to carry one piece.
All right. Now, within the Levites was a small family. Well, there was the 3 main groups that we talked about. And within the family of Kehat were the priests. The priests did all of the holy work, and the rest of the Levites who were not priests